Përshëndetje të gjithë. Hello everyone. Mirëmëngjes, mirëdita, mirëmbrëma. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Në emër të grupit organizator, ju uroj mirëseardhje në simpoziumin e dytë të diasporës në Amerikë me temën Roli vendimtar i Arvanitasve në organizimin dhe fitoren e revolucionit grek. On behalf of our organizing committee, it's our pleasure to welcome to our second symposium of Albanian diaspora in the United States on the crucial role of Arvanites in the organization and victory of the Greek Revolution. Unë jam Elton Mara, jam një nga anëtarët e grupit organizues. Ky është një event që është realizuar në bashkëpunim me Organizatën Shqiptare Amerikane Vatra, me kryetar zotin Ahmet Gjafo, me Qendrën Kulturore Shqiptare Amerikane Shqipja Arizonës, Shkolla Shqipe Arizona dhe Shoqata Shqiptare Amerikane Grave të Arizonës. I am Elton Mara. I am one of the members of the organizing committee. This event is realized in collaboration of Pan-Albanian Federation of America, the HERF, with the president, Mr. Ahmet Gjafo, Albanian Civic Center of Arizona, Albanian American Culture Center Eagle of Arizona, and the Albanian American Women Association of Arizona. Ky simpozium është ndarë në 3 pjesë. Moderatori i parë është Dr. Gashi, i ndjekur nga profesoresha Linda Mëniku dhe doktoresha Elona Lasku. The symposium is divided in 3 parts. The first moderator is Dr. Gashi, followed by Professor Linda Mëniku and Dr. Elona Lasku. Radhën për ja jap Dr. Gashit. Now it's Dr. Gashi's turn.
Përshëndetje, ju faleminderit zoti Dr. Mara. Tash kam nderin të paraqes zotin Ahmet Gjafo, kryetarin e Vatrës. Zoti Gjafo?
Më duket se zoti Gjafo nuk po hyn dot. Mund ta vazhdojmë më vonë.
Kemi disa probleme teknike në këtë, po vazhdojmë me folësin e parë të programit, para se të fillojmë në folësat e pjesës parë. I vend ndije që çdo folës ka një kohë të kushtëzuar nga 7 deri në 10 minuta. Edhe ju kujtojmë që për shkak të numrit të personave që do flasin, koha është e kufizuar, por të gjithë folësit do t'i dërgojnë studimet e tyre me email dhe ne parashikojmë që të gjitha studimet të botohen on print ose në online ose të dyja. I just wanted to remind everyone that each speaker will have 7 to 10 minutes because the time is restricted. The speakers will present their papers in a printed version, which we will make it available in the future. Tash kam nderin të prezantoj mikun ton, të cilin e njohim për shumë vjet, profesor Antonio Bellushi. Profesor Bellushi është prift, etnolog, studius Arbëresh, gazetar dhe drejtori i revistës Arbëresh e Lidhja. Unë kam kënaqësinë të ju njoftoj që me profesor Bellushin jam takuar disa herë në New York, por 2 nga këto raste janë disa kujtime shumë interesante. Në vitin 1996, unë isha ndër folësit e darkës në kremtimin e pavarësisë shqiptare nga Federata Panshqiptare Vatra dhe Komuniteti Shqiptar në New York, dhe ishim të ulën së bashku me Bellushin në një tavolinë, i cili edhe ai mbajti fjalimin e rastit. Hera e dytë që e kam takuar dhe hera fundit ka qenë në 100 vjetorin e Vatrës, e themelimit të Vatrës në New York nga Bellushi, dhe në atë takim zoti Bellushi mbajti me aprovimin e gjithë klerikëve, mbajti një lutje fetare në atë darkë. So I have the honor to present Father Antonio Bellushi, Father Bellusci is an ethnologue, an Arbëresh researcher, a journalist, and director of the Arbëresh magazine Lidhja. His topic is epic and lyrics in Arbëresh, Arvanites in Lidhja. The tema e Zotit Antoni Bellusci është epika dhe lirika në arborët Arvanit në Eladh. Atë Bellusci, mund të fillosh tash.
Ju përshëndes me zëmër gjithë me juve. Jam këtu tek Arbëria jon. Po zëmra ime është tek Vatra. Falenderoj Vatra për këtë simpozium që na jep rastin të bashkohemi gjithë shpirtërisht, kurmërisht, edhe me gjithë vëllezërit arbëror, arvanit që jetojnë që në shekullin 12 atje në Eladha. Jam shumë i nderuar. Do të them se kur u bë i pari parlament grek që u bë në Napoleon në 1831, gjithë eronjët, gjithë pjesëmarrësit të krengritjes për pavarësinë e shtetit grek vun çështje në të cilën gjuhë kishte mbajën fjalimet tek parlamenti. Në grekisht ose shqip. Pse? Shumica të gjithëve këtyre eronjëve, kryengjitësve që dihen, ishin arbëror. U preferojnë të thom arbëror. Për këtë jo Arvanit, se erdhi pastaj kjo shprehje. U jam arbëror. Gjuha arbërore që na nderon. Kjo gjuhë arbërishte ishte një gjuhë trimërishte e flit navarko, mjaulli, bocari edhe gjithë sulli. Eronjtë që morën pjesë të ai parlament ishen Kryezotis, ishen Shkurtanjotis, Zavelas, Koqo, Mjaulli, Bouboulina e të gjithë tjerëve. Gjithë krahinat e Greqisë në Peloponez, në Korinthi, në Beoci, në Lokridh, në Atik, janë qindra katunde arbëror që u vizitove e që pse nuk shikohet?
Jo, dhe shihet, është njerëz.
Ha?
Shihet.
Shihet. Që u vizitova edhe i kam botuar në dikta vepra këtu, kërkime dhe studime ndër arbëroret e Greqisë, e një tër vepër që është kjo këtu, arbëror Arvanit, një popull i padukshëm. Dhe këta di vepra janë gjithë letërsia e tyre gojore e gjithë historia e tyre epike. Edhe në këto kartina dëfton kjo se idhra është plot me katunde arbëror, si edhe në krahinën e Korinthis. Janë më se 90 katunde që janë atje. Këto karta janë të botuara në Greqi nga studiuesit që janë atje. Kam bërë shumë udhëtime tek vëllezërit arbëror në Greqi. Pse ne Arbëresh me arbëroret kemi një histori, kemi një gjak, kemi një gjuhë, kemi një besim që na bashkojen ngushtë. Dihet se emigrimet që ka gadishulli balkanik kanë filluar në shekullin 15 pas vdekjes e Skanderbeut kanë vazhduar edhe në shekullit e tjerë, deri në miljet e 724, ku kanë ardhur të një katund Arbëresh në provincën Peskares, që thonë Villa Badesa. Dhe të gjithë këta emigrime që kanë ardhur këtu në Kalavri edhe kanë shkuar në Greqi, në ata troje, deri në fund, deri kjo vjen me thënë se na Arbëresh kemi luftuar për të bëjem shtetin italian, e kjo dihet. Ashtu edhe vëllezërit arbëror kanë luftuar të gjithë për të krijojen patrida greka, shtetin grek. Po, ka ki kombë real, si është Greqia, si është Italia edhe për ne, na kemi njëtër kombë ideale. Kombë ideale si është gjuha e mëmes, zakonet tanë, rritin bizantin për ne që jemi në këtu në Kalavri, të rrethuar ka italianet me ritualin e latinëve italian, kemi gjithë këto identitete. Këto identitete që bëjen, mund thomi se ne Arbëresh e ne arbërorë në Greqi, ashtu si shkruan e Arshipypa, një revistë sud-est evropiane, jemi një fenomen interkulturor, sepse bashkëjetojen të shpirti i njëj arbërori Arvanit, ose Arbëresh, bashkëjetojen gjithë to identitete, si është rënja shqiptare, gjaku shqiptare, gjuha shqiptare, zakonet tana, këngët epike, rapsodit e para që na lartësojen shpirtin kudo. Kështu na jemi krenar, jemi italian me këto vlera shpirtërore deri sot. Ashtu edhe vëllezërit arbëror janë krenar, janë grek, me gjithë se shkolla nuk të jep asgjë për të ruajtjen kësaj pasurije kulturore, pse kemi bëmë gjithë me djerset e tona, botomi libre, botomi revista, mbami të gjallë shpirtin e arbërit, shpirtin e arbërit. Na, të takimet e mia, kam njohur shumë njerëz që kanë të gjallë këtë shpirtin e arbërit në zemër. Atje në Greqi, përsim këta vëllezër që takova, ka Peshkopet Panteleimon Korinthias, ka Kranidi, Stefanos Kakiparisia, Hieronymos Lapis, që është krijetari i Kiqës ortodokse në Greqi sot, Shkathiva, ashtu këta peshkopra, këta mitropolit, më kanë ndihmuar gjithmonë, pse edhe tek shpirti i tyre është ky shpirt i gjallë arbëror. E duke vazhduar, duke bërë këta udhëtime dhe kërkimet e mia në trojet në Eladhë, u preferojnë të thomë gjithmonë Eladha, pse në kohën me të cilët folën ju, nuk ekzistonte Greqia si shtet. Janë 200 vjetë që u bë, e jemi kremtomi këtë datë të bukur. Se Italia nuk ekzistonte si shtet, u bën në 1861. Për këtë, na kemi gjithmonë përpara se ish geografia e gadishurit balkanik, parse të krijomi probleme, o për të thomi se jemi këtu, o jemi këtje. Gjithë nacionalizmet u zhvilluan në këto kohët e fundit. Po në shekullin 19 ishte zhvilluar ndjenja kombëtare, shqiptare, edhe kemi poeme në gjuhën shqipe. Për këtë thotë ajo, kjo gjuhë arbërishte ishte një gjuhë trimërishte. E gjithë, po pranë alfabeti, u përdor alfabeti grek, që këputnej gjithë rënjat. E kështu kam njohur Aristidikolias, ky historian i madh, që bëri shumë tek shoqata Marko Bocari, e ky Arvanites, që botoi, edhe ai bëri një libër, thonej gjuha perëndivet, thonej ky Aristidikolias. Në EUB kemi këtë Jani Gjikas, që botoi një gjithë kërkimet e tire në EUB me muzikën epike dhe lirike të këtyre arbërorë që janë atje në mbi ngritjen e grekëve. Kemi di historian arbëror. Një është këtu Haxhi Soteriu, Jorgos Soteriu, që kam njohur personalisht, e që në Atik bëri shumë studime logografike edhe njëtër. Lirika dhe epika tek arbëroret në Eladh është shumë e përhapur. Këta di libra këtu, Tito Johalas, është mbi idhra. Idhra e spece dihet se qenë atje i shtezari i anglezvet për të bëjën kryengritjen kundër turqvet. Idhra, edhe kemi, në speci kemi Bouboulina, këtë grua eroike. Këtu janë plot me rapsodi epike, që në mundi lexojnë në nisë s'kam kohë, edhe lirike. Janë lumturisht, janë të shkruara për herë të parë me alfabetin shqiptar. Ashtu, pse alfabeti grek dihet në ngësht i aftë të shpreh gjithë ato shprehjet të gjuhës. Edhe këtu epika dhe lirika e jemi të ke libër shumë i bukur, Izoiton, Arvaniton, Saltari. Edhe këtu kemi, këtu janë muzika e kënga epika, po janë me alfabetin, shiko, janë edhe me muzikën bizantine, janë me alfabetin grek. Shikoni që libër i bukur, me zakone, me gjithë tjerët. Njëtër libër i bukur, pjot me, në është janë prodhimet bukura. Këto më kanë sjell para një muaj, këtë Filipu Petru është ka Livja, një katunda arbëror afer Koropi, afer Athines, bëri gjithë mbledh me Petros Furriqis. Petros Furriqis në 1800 janë gjithë shkruar me alfabetin grek, me alfabetin e shqip. Me historinë e mbarova, me historinë e këtirëve, kemi Kostabilis, shumë interesanti, historia të në linon Arvaniton, Kostabilis, edhe kemi Kristopullu, janë historianët që rfjen, ata thonë se nuk ekzistojnë. Po, ata ekzistojnë në vëllezërit arbëror. Kanë këtë letërsi, kanë lirikat, me gjithë jetesen e përditshme, ata këndojnë kënga lirike, kur nusja martohet, e uajtë shpi për shpi. Vizitova 150 katunde, e bërë këto di vepra të mëdha, edhe shumë i botova këtu, të revista Lidhja. Të kjo revistë janë gjithë historitë e mia, udhëtimet e mia, ku vajta për 20 vjetë atje të vëllezërit arbëror. Mbaroj se koha mbaroj, zotë në.
Faleminderit, shumë i faleminderit atë Bellushi. Në vitin 2003, kam qenë me një konferencë në Buenos Aires, në Argentinë, edhe atje vizitova komunitetin Arbëresh nga Frasineto, edhe aty pash revistën që botoni ju në komunitetin e Frasinetos në Argentinë. Të me thënë edhe ata i ruanin rranjet arbërore, arbëreshe. Dhe ju falenderojnë për punën tuaj, sepse gjatë viteve 80 ju keni vizitu mbi 150 katunde që përmende dhe aty keni mbledh shumë materiale me vlera të mëdha. Ndërta që përmende ti rapsodia, këngët, ata janë një pjesë, një pasuri kulturore e atij vendi. Dhe njerë ju falenderoj. Thank you, Father BELLUSCI. I was at a conference in Argentina in 2003, and during my stay there for 4 days, I made it my plan to visit the Arbëresh community there. And when I visited their center, I came across the magazine that Father BELLUSCI just mentioned that he published when he served, and I think he still serves as the editor of the magazine. Ju faleminderit shumë edhe një herë. Tash kemi sipas radhës folësin tjetër, është profesor Eva Tafili Hyskaj nga Universiteti i Tiranës. Tema e profesor Tafili Hyskaj është disa udhëheqës të shquar shqiptar të revolucionit grek të vitit 1821. And now we have Professor Eva Tafili Hyskaj from the University of Tirana. Her topic is some prominent Albanian leaders of the Greek Revolution of 1821. Professor Tafili Hyskaj.
Faleminderit nderuar moderator. Faleminderit për gjithçka. I'd like to thank the organizers, Pan-Albanian Federation of America, Albanian Civic Center of Arizona, Albanian American Cultural Center Eagle of Arizona, and Albanian American Women Association of Arizona. I greet you on behalf of University of Tirana and thank you for the honor and respect you have shown by inviting us to be part of this symposium. Today's scientific symposium is devoted to the Greek Revolution and the crucial role of Arvanites in it. That's the reason why you and the organizers have invited scholars like the personalities like Father BELLUSCI and others who have devoted their studies, their life, their scientific research to those historical issues. The legacy of these historical facts or historical issues remain to this day a powerful path towards the proper writing of history. That's why it is worthwhile to deepen the understanding and the colors of bilateral relations and develop their prospects in the future. I'd like to wish success to everyone and then start with my speech. While talking for the 19th century history of the peninsula of the Balkans, I'll try to explain that it was the area where the Ottoman conquest and the Habsburg reconquest overlapped to a large extent. Within the 19th century, the so-called the epoch of nationalism, the period 1804-1830 provides a very meaningful framework. The year 1804 is a symbol, the date of the Serbs' rights that marked the beginning of the struggle of nationalities against empires. And after the risings of Serbs to a national revolution that year, it was the Greek War of Independence that showed the attempts of Balkan nations to assume the forms of states. The nations of Balkans were non-made. They were invented, as I'll explain later, constructed, rejected, and then revived. A major component towards their path to modern states were the ideas of the French Revolution, the ideas of nation and national awakening for both sides, for Serbs, Greeks, and all other small nationalities in the Balkans. New ideas came in Greece too, where merchants and entrepreneurs found the economic and political concepts for liberalism and enlightenment very attractive. Greek wealth also paved the way for a new force in Greek culture. Wealthy Greeks commissioned the printing of books, while there was a revival of interest in Greek learning and traditions too. Among the leaders in the revival was Greek Adamantios Korais, the son of a merchant in Smyrna, and pursuing his education, he traveled to Paris. He was heavily influenced by French Enlightenment, by French thoughts and the ideas of French Revolution, to which he was even an eyewitness. He supported the idea of revolution in Greece, and his main contribution to Greek rebirth was not political but cultural. Another contrasting but prominent figure in the Greek revival was Rigas Pharias of La, who was born in Thessaly. He began his career as an interpreter in the ranks of Phanariots, but left Turkey to further his education. In Western Europe, he too was influenced by ideas of French Revolution, and he was an active participant in secret societies and free masonry lodges. Clearly, the French Revolution played a role in the minds of all those people, because Rigas Pharias was also very known for the poem War Hymn, was the best call for revolt through the Greeks. After 1804, the example of the Serbian Revolution also pointed the way toward possible change. We can get a good picture of the Greeks for whom change was attractive by looking at the members of conspiracy of 1821. The original instigators of the uprisings were members of a secret society called the Filiki or Friendly Society. It was founded in the Russian port of Odessa in 1814, and like their other lodges, which were fraternal groups or self-help associations made up of merchants, the society occupied the Freemasons in Greece rituals, ranks, secrecy, but the main aim of the society was, in fact, revolt. From records of the Filiki branch of Odessa, we see that with some possible exception, most members were not wealthy or influential. In 1814, even an Arvanite, Marco Bocciari, joined the Greek society known as the Filiki. Bocciari was a leader of the Suliots and the hero of the Greek War of Independence. He was born in one of the leading clans of the Suliots in Epirus. In 1803, after the capture of Suli by Ali Pasha, Bocciari, with the remnants of Suliots, crossed over to the Ionian Islands, where he took service in French regiment, while in 1820 made common cause with Greeks against the Ottoman Empire. In the Greek revolt, he was distinguished by his courage, skills as a partisan leader in fighting, especially in Western Greece and in the defense of Missolonghi during the first siege, 1822-1823. His thought was continued, it was gone ahead by his brother Kostas Bocciaris, who fought at Karpenisi, Missolonghi too, and completed the victory after Marco's death. Kostas became a Greek general, a respected parliamentarian during the Greek kingdom, and Marco's son, even Dimitrios, as well, was 3 times Minister of War during the reigns of Otto of Greece and George I of Greece. However, the Greek Revolution was also led by a broad spectrum of Arvanites, and it arouses our interest even because of that fact. Other prominent Arvanites leaders were Lascarina Pinocci, but I see that someone after me is speaking widely for that, so I'm leaving it only with the fact that it was the only female member of Filiki and stands out for having raised the Greek flag on board of her ship and starting a naval blockage against the Ottomans. Another one was Georgios Kondoriotis, a member of executive committee of the Greek Revolution, and even the president during the period 1823-1826. Another one was Kocho Javela, an Arvanite origin, born in Suli in the beginning of the 19th century and grown up in Kerkura. He took part as fighter in the Greek War of Independence, and after the revolution served even as prime minister. Along with Georges Karaiskakis, Javela played a leading role in the Greek Revolution in 1821, especially during the siege of Missolonghi. Javela, a long time and kind of enemy or rival of Marco Bocciaris, during the later part of the war, after Yannis Kapodistrias arrived in Greece, was responsible for the liberation of much of central Greece. He became a supporter of Kapodistria and distinguished leader of the conservative Russian party during the time of King Otto. As described above, it's clear that the Greek Revolution of 1821 began as a planned conspiracy in which only selected elements of Greek nation had a role. The modern idea of nationality remained elusive even for the most self-conscious revolutionaries. Filiki Eteria planned to start the uprising in 3 places. One was the Peloponnese, where a core group of plebs supported the plot. The second side was Istanbul, where there were plans for rioting among the Greek Phanariots community, and the third part of the plan involved invasion of principates in Romania by Greek forces crossing the Russian border from Odessa. The only success was in the Peloponnese. After the success of 1821, the war in South became a stalemate until 1825 for some and for several reasons. A cause of stalemate was among the Greeks, reflecting pre-existing class differences. The armed peasants and former plebs in the Morea were loyal to Theodore Kolokotronis, an Arvanite former pleb. Opposing him were the civilian leaders in the National Assembly, including Alexander Mavrocordates and Yorgo Koundouris, another Arvanite. Mavrocordates came from a well-connected Phanariot family, and Koundouris was a wealthy ship owner from the island Hydra. By 1823, the two sides were engaged in a kind of civil war. Another cause of the stalemate were Britain, France, and Russia. Each of these states had strategic, political, economic interests in Turkey and wanted to make sure that the result of the war in Greece would not hurt them. The fourth and last phase of the revolution was the Russian-Turkish War at 1828-1830. Russia accepted British and French participation in the peace settlement. The London Protocol of 1830 created a small independent Greek kingdom ruled by Prince Otto of Bavaria, German prince acceptable to all 3 powers, but never accepted by Greeks. Apart from the actions and diplomacy of the great powers, we must say that the brain, the heart, and the body of Greek War of Independence was a very important triangle, i.e. the French Revolution, the Filiki Eteria, and the Arvanites, or other ethnicities. To explain that triangle, today we must stop at each of the 3 points. In the vision of French Revolution, which is the first one, the nation was perceived as a means of freedom from tyranny and localism. A revolution mentality was set up as a new bond for the Christians of the Ottoman Empire. The supporter of that idea in the Balkans saw the revolution as the confirmation of the fact that history even could be done, but even could be endured. They organized themselves in revolutionary societies that were so typical of the times. Their purpose was the promotion of Greek culture, but the principal aim was the creation of a Christian Balkan state. The Eteria provide a strange mixture of inspirations, like the idea that Greece would lead all the Balkan Christians, French revolutionary ideology, principles behind the Holy Alliance under Russian protection, etc. It involves
just a reminder, you have 1 more minute.
It involves Romanians, Greeks, Serbian traders, and a lot of prominent Albanian Arvanites, the one I mentioned, and even much more. As exemplified by all of them, only after the initial successes of rebellion would other communities react to Greek nationalism. The old concept of faith and the new one of ethnicity remain strong, but the ideology of French Revolution and the way in which it was spread in Europe forged a new conception of society. Altogether, Greeks, Albanians, Romanians, Vlachs contributed to the emergence of what the authors of nationalism and especially Benedict Anderson has called imagined communities. That means conservation, creation, and modification of the sense of community in response to specific historical circumstances. As a result of the revolution, Greece had become an independent kingdom, the first in the Balkans, but the new state had to decide its relationship to the Greek nation at large. Some 800,000 Greeks lived in the kingdom, but 2.5 million remained under Ottoman rule. Through their attempts, participation, heroic acts, and even political position, those prominent Arvanite leaders had very crucial impact in the Greek War of Independence. They even succeeded in setting up a small idea of nation. Meanwhile, the rhetoric of liberal and romantic nationalism of that age empowered the race of Greek modern state. Thank you, and sorry for the time.
Thank you, Professor Tafili Hyskaj, for the enlightening presentation. Ju falenderoj profesoresh Tafili Hyskaj për këtë prezantim dhe studim shumë interesant. Tashi, I have the honor to present Professor Lambros Baltsiotis. He's a professor at Panteon University in Greece. His topic is, Does Language Really Matter? The Albanian-speaking orthodox Arvanites in the Greek War of Independence. Kam kënaqësinë të prezantoj Profesor Lambros Baltsiotis nga Universiteti Panteon në Greqi. Tema e tij do të jetë A ka rëndësi gjuha, ortodoksët Arvanitës që flisnin shqip në luftën greke të pavarësisë. Professor Lambriotis.
Baltsiotis. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'd like to thank the organizing committee. Well, I've got 10 minutes, so I'll skip some issues. In this short presentation, I will try to trace the importance or the insignificance of different language and ethnicity of a rather high percentage of the population who took the arms during the Greek War of Independence. Korai, he was mentioned before, is in one of his letters introduced us to the issue the Greek revolutionaries faced at the time. The Westerners, the Europeans, learned, he says, that Albanians are participating in the war, plus the Suliotes, not only Arvanites, and that's a problem, as this undermines the picture of Greece, of Greeks, and the revolution. And to a certain extent, it did, as in the eyes of the so-called civilized nations, these dark-skinned, semi-barbarian, and uneducated people, the Greeks, were deserving support and an independent state as descendants of the ancient Greeks. And currently, the only proof, let's say, of connection was the language. These fears, though, were not widespread, and they were the Europeans again who, via their scientific, at that time, theories, that means the myths of Illyrians and Pelasgians, connected Greeks and Albanians equally with the antiquity. And after that, everything was easier. The so-called national historian of Greece, Papàs, in 1850 wrote, two races reside in Greece, Greeks and Albanians. But do Albanians consist a separate nation? No, he answers. They will be assimilated through education and the cultural power of Hellenism. So that was the ideas at the time. But let's return to the facts. Indeed, we estimate that at least 1 out of 5 Christian inhabitants of the areas included in the new state was Albanian speaker. I could say even 1 out of 4. I have to mention here that language shift towards Greek was already underway in certain communities in early 18th century, even in Muslim ones. For example, Lala community of Peloponnese, of Albanian-speaking Muslims. These percentages, these rates, 20–25%, have dropped as many refugees initially and immigrants from 1830 on settled in the new state. However, some of the compact Albanian-speaking areas remain almost intact. I can show you here just one. Here are the Albanian-speaking areas with the red color. You see that the formation, the state, the borderline here. So we have all these compact areas here and some other communities in other areas. So I'd like to make 2 remarks. The first one has to do with the different Greek dialects spoken in the regions of Peloponnese and Central Greece. Forget about English in USA, let's think about English in UK or German in Germany, not mention the situation in Italy. So we know from the 19th century's text and the recent work of linguists that even in Peloponnese, different Greek dialects were spoken, some of them hardly mutually intelligible. The same goes to Albanian dialects of the area, of course. Thus, we have to rethink in case we perceive two different linguistic words, the Greek and the Albanian linguistic word at that time. The second remark, accordingly, has to do with a supposed division between Greeks and Albanians at that time, not as seen by educated foreigners or Greeks independently of the language they spoke within their family. I mean, Greek in the wider sense. There are a few texts that confirm, and it's not a peculiarity or a novelty, what I will suggest, that in fact there were far more important divisions, if I can call them so, than linguistic ones. They were first of all related with a conflict between livestock breeding groups and those settled in agricultural rural settlements, and additionally many other local or supra-local divisions penetrating various communities not related with linguistic lines. This is one major, on the other hand, there is one major distinct group, the maritime communities of Hydra, Spetses, and Kranidi, and another distinct group of minor importance, the transhuman shepherds of northwestern Peloponnese in Panachaiko Mountain in today's Achaia. The Hydra Spetses Kranidi group did not play the Albanian language card after the foundation of the Greek state, and this was also related with the financial decline of these communities and the mass immigration that followed. So all the late 19th century and early 20th century voices who dislike the linguistic policies of the Greek state, besides Koulouriotis and Nerouchos, are coming from these communities. What I want to say is that these two communities, the communities of Hydra Spetses, decided not to separate themselves, not nationally, but in a, let's say, local or ethnic way from the rest of the Greeks. They had this intention, many things with the Albanian language in this would be different. That's my point here, okay? On the other hand, we trace a kind of vague but still existent sense of community between all these Albanian-speaking groups, between Arvanites. There was a kind of knowledge of the existence of communities in other places and a kind of linguistic solidarity. In the year 1822, the inhabitants of Dobrena, an Albanian-speaking settlement in the southwest of Lidhja, welcome in Albanian, in Arvanitica, Captain Kriezis from Hydra and feel a specific connection with a Hydriot from Hydra crew, as we interpret the text for this specific connection, at least, of the memoirs of Captain Kriezis. But what about the elites? How they were thinking? Did they perceive Arvanites as a whole, as a separate, distinct group? Was it a kind of political issue? It is quite clear that local divisions were by far predominant in the eyes of the elites. We feel quite safe to conclude that by reading texts written up to early 40s, thus avoiding the possible self-censorship that might occur in texts written later on. In my earlier works, I supported the idea that there was at least a specific educational policy towards these communities. Well, it turned to be, I think now, an ex post approach caused by the specific policies initialized in 1870s. I was based on texts of mid-1840s in which the Ministry of Education is taking specific measures in order to address the schooling of the Albanian-speaking communities of northern Andros. It's an island. Well, that was a mistake, I think, as no other similar archival material was made for the areas of Corinthia, for which the archives have been explicitly studied, Attica, or any other region. In fact, the education issue was completely different, considering the notorious Greek diglossia. It didn't matter how a boy at that area, because boys were schooling at that area, It didn't matter how a boy was calling water, bread, and house in his home. In Greek, it would be nero, psomi, spiti. In Albanian, it could be ui, book, spi, or stepi. But they both, when they go to school, they have to learn completely new words, unknown words, a different linguistic code. So they have to call these three notions, idor, arto, and ikia. So we have not to forget, on the other hand, that there are some negative mentions for the language in 1830s and 40s. I spotted no more than half a dozen. However, it's a French Alsatian from Alsace, Deichtal, who writes, "It's not possible to form any kind of administration in the area of Thebes as they are ignorant of Greek." He writes that in 1834. In fact, he's carrying, as it was mentioned before, the ideas of the French Revolution and this progressive point of view, let's say, the logic that citizens must learn the language of the laws. So we have to think in a different way at the time, okay? In the year 1828, when Capodistria collects information on the situation of the country, nearly no one but those educated informants, administrative officials, or local elites coming from areas where a language had already begun are indicating the language in the different languages in certain groups of settlements. For the rest of the informants, it's quite indifferent. It's the same attitude towards the language someone speaks in a certain occasion or addresses someone or a group. In general, this is not worth mentioning in texts. Archimandrite Nathanael, in his writing for Arbëresh, although quite informative of various relevant to the language issues and tradition, even of the Turks of the Muslims of the island, doesn't mention anything related to the Albanian language of the most of the settlements of the southern part of the island. Most, if not all the cases that mention language and ethnicity are coming from areas where language shift was already underway or in areas where mixed population was resting. In 1829, troops were sent in the area of Kapeli, Greek troops against Greeks, in the area of Kapeli in mountains northeast Ilia to knock some sense into the Albanians. In 1834, a rank officer mentions that Kollias Plapoutas and the monk, after being arrested by the official troops, started talking to each other in Albanian. This takes place in an area of southwest Peloponnese. Monk's native village does speak Arvanitic a century now. And what the officer wants to say here is that they use Arvanitica for cryptolalic purposes, and he adds, the idiots, they were thinking we don't understand Arvanitica. So you see the cases where Arvanitica as a separate language appears in the text of that era. To conclude, in principle, language and ethnicity don't matter, at least during and after the war. There is no real trace of any institutionalization of the linguistic or ethnic difference. And this is related with the fact that Greek nationalism is a religious one, as every other Balkan nationalism besides the Albanian, which was absent the period we were examining. We trace literally thousands of documents for those mostly by force, converted to Christianity during the conflicts, but a neat little pile of documents related with language and ethnicity. And that's because religion really matters. It includes or excludes one from the new nation under formation, the Greek nation, includes or excludes someone from this nation-building process, then later on, and to a certain extent until nowadays. I would say in Greece, our citizenship, the Greek citizenship law reform and Nationality Act reform it's a kind of major importance. It was this took place in 2010. Okay, it seems that public history's perceptions on Arvanites in Greece and Albania are shaped by an ex-post reading of the Western literature of that era, and mostly through the conflict of two completely different models, typologies, I might say, of nationalism. A linguistic one, the Albanian, and a religious one, the Greek one, and through the relevant national myths prevailing in the two countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Baltsiotis. We very much appreciate your contribution in this field. You enlightened us, especially by looking at both the linguistic and also the role of the religion that has played, the religion as an institution that has played in this process of the aftermath of the Greek Revolution and what has happened to the Arvanites population. Now, ju falenderoj profesor Baltsiotis që na dat një kornizë shumë interesante të historisë së Arvanitasve, sidomos atë pjesën që vendukje mënyrën institucionale të kishës në rolin që kanë luajtur ndaj Arvanitasve. Tash, now I'd like to present Professor Peter Constantine. Professor Constantine is a literary translator, editor, and director of the Literary Translation Program at the University of Connecticut in the USA. His topic is Bubuulina, Arvanite, Matriarch, and Revolution. Tash kam kënaqësinë të prezantoj Profesor Peter Constantine, përkthyes letrar, redaktor dhe drejtori i programit të përkthimit letrar në Universitetin Connecticut në SBA. Tema e tij do të jetë Bubuulina, Matriarchia Arvanitase dhe Revolucioni.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the wonderful invitation and the opportunity to speak about Bubuulina, who I'm going to say us Greeks. I'm quarter Greek, but I grew up in Greece in the 60s and 70s, so and with Arvanitic connections. So a particularly important figure both nationally and internationally. So I'd like to share my screen to give you some images, because her image, the image of Bubuulina, both in Greece and outside Greece at the time, in the 1820, 1821, the years leading up to the revolution, and then the years when the revolution had begun, were very, very inspiring to Philhellenes throughout Europe and in America as well. So so Bubuulina, Arvanite matriarch and revolution. Now, from an Arvanitic perspective, we've seen Bubuulina as Mememad, like the big mother who runs the household, which is a sort of a typical, the katund, like in the villages we have, if let's say the Papuimad, the big father, runs the family, Ben Command runs the show. But if he's not there, if the matriarch is widowed, then she takes over. So this is a rather typical situation, although for Bubuulina it happened in a rather untypical way. So this iconic image of her shows Bubuulina in her capacity of a warring matriarch, the first woman admiral in the world. Now, this is 1820, 1821, 1822. I'd like to mention the first woman admiral, I think, in the United States was about 4 or 5 years ago, in the UK as well. In other words, 2015 and 2016 were the first admirals, in other words, running the navy in a big way, or parts of it. So for Bubuulina, as a woman, to have been able to do that 200 years ago is absolutely spectacular. So she should be in the Guinness Book of Records for being the first admiral and a naval commander. So she was the daughter of Scervo and Stavrianos, and she was born in Constantinople of the Pinotsis family. The reason she was born in Constantinople in prison is because I would say Bouboulina proved to be very much Scervo's daughter. Stavrianos Pinotsis had been in the Orlov Wars, where the Russians had come down into Greek territories to start the Russian version of the Megali there. Греческий проект, they called it. It was the Greek project, where Catherine the Great sent the brother of her lover, Orlov, who was a naval commander, to Greece with ships, with the idea of creating a Byzantine empire that would be controlled through Russia, and to liberate the Greek territories from the Ottomans. That was the idea. So Stavrianos had been part of that insurrection in 1869, 1870. He was, the insurrection didn't work out. He ended up in prison. And what Scervo did is she traveled, when she was 7 and 8 months pregnant, she traveled from Hydra, the island where they lived. She traveled to Constantinople and into the prison in order to help her husband, who was dying. Lascarina Pinotsis, Lascarina Bouboulina, was then born in the prison. Pinotsis did die, Stavrianos, and so they left and they returned to Hydra. So those were the beginnings. The idea, of course, we have to again think from a historical perspective. Scervo is it's 1820. They're pirates. There's an absolute chaos everywhere, and yet she will travel out to Constantinople in order to see if she can save her husband or if she can somehow help him. So that we already see that kind of, the big mother kind of tradition there of the Arvanitic spirit. Very quickly, just from an image point of view, all these areas, of course, here were Arvanitic speaking. You see Hydra, which in Arvanitic was called Idriza, is where Bouboulina, Lascarina was from, her family. And when the mother, Scervo, returned, she married an Orlov, not a Russian Orlov, but they called him Orlov because he was part of the revolution as well, the Orlov Revolution. And they moved to Spetses. And Spetses now is in fact the island that Bouboulina is very much connected to. That's who we think. We call her Spetsiotis, like she is the Spetsiot matriarch. So Bouboulina was married and widowed twice. Januzas was her first husband, whom she married when she was 17. He was killed by Algerian pirates. And then she married Bubulis in 1801 when she was 30. He was also killed by Algerian pirates in 1821. And this, again, shows the kind of the chaos and the difficulties in the Aegean around the coastline of Greece. However, both Januzas and then, of course, Bubulis as well, with whom Bouboulina, and let me just quickly say, Bouboulina means wife of Bubulis. Maybe a little bit like Russian, Karenin, Anna Karenina. Here we have Bubulis, Bouboulina. She belongs to Dimitrios. So she would travel with them. She knew, she was a very hands-on person. She knew how to run a ship. She knew how to steer a ship. She very much participated in what her husbands did. They and she later on as well had their ships travel under Russian flags, which meant that they could break embargoes, they could do import-export on a grand scale, which was part of the result of the agreements that came after the Orlov Orlov revolt. Anyway, but they that was one way in which they amassed an absolute incredible fortune. So when Dimitrios Bubulis was killed in 1811, she was the wealthiest woman in Greece. And this was one of the first things that she did, is that she built the Agamemnon, which was the biggest and strongest warship in the Greek lands. And as we've already said, when we say Greek lands, Greek territories, I'm using this in a sort of from a modern perspective, because it was Ottoman territory at the time, but let's say the area that we now call Greece. Again, these years after the death of her husband, Bubulis, she continued to amass a fortune, and she showed an incredible force and vigor. What she did, for instance, it was not easy to build a ship like this. One of the Merzis, who's one of her great grandsons, said that it cost 75,000 thalers, which is a grand fortune, and is about she had with the lands and houses and everything that she had under her own power, she had also 300,000 thalers. So it was a major investment to build a warship of this kind. And she managed to build the warship by bribing Ottoman officials. Other Spetsiots, people from Spetses, tried to denounce her that she's building this. So there was a lot of controversy. It wasn't a very clear situation, but she managed to get those people who were denouncing her, to get them sent away, I think imprisoned as well. In fact, I mean, she was a ruthless woman. She bribed the Ottoman officials. She managed to build this ship Agamemnon, which then later on became the warship Spetses, and for many years was the biggest and strongest cannon boat. Here we have again the image of Bouboulina, and this is what I wanted to talk about as well, particularly. She caught the imagination of the European Philhellenes. The idea of revolution, as we've heard as well before, after the French Revolution, now the Greek Revolution, the idea that there would be a war of independence in Greece, caught the imagination because this was a Christian people, the descendants of the golden age of Athens, who had brought Western traditions and Western thinking to the world. They now were trying to revolt against the Muslim Ottoman occupation. That had caught the imagination, and particularly the idea of a strong and beautiful woman who was bon command, right? She is running the show. That idea really did catch their imagination. Now, for us in Greece as well, I mean, when I lived in Greece, we again see these images. They were on money, they were on coins. Bubuulina was absolutely everywhere. And she was being painted and drawn and shown in periodicals throughout the world, in the United States. Bubuulina, Boboline, La Boboline, women in France dressed à la Boboline. So there'd be these grand parties in Paris where women would dress in what they imagined might be what they've seen in these paintings. Here we see another version of Bubuulina, more the matriarch who's running the show, but maybe not a woman of beauty, but rather a woman of substance and a hard kind of person. I should say she was 50 at the beginning in 1821. This was at a time when, with 34, 35 years, really those that was your average lifespan in those years. At 50, she was already a very, very old woman, if we look at it from a perspective of that time. Here again, a different image of Bouboulina. This was a play written by Efrosini, who was Christiana Newberg, who took on the Efrosini name because this Philhellenism, Greece and the glory and all that, and she wrote a play based on Bouboulina. Here we have Michel de Gresse, La Bouboulina. Here you see, I mean, this actually isn't Bouboulina, but many people thought that this is would be what she looked like. Of course, that kind of décolleté, and you know, it does touch the you know, the image of maybe the seductress. And there were E.T.A. Hoffmann, the German writer, had written, for instance, a book where a baron came down, die schöne Griechin, like to meet the beautiful Greek woman. And images like this is what started that. I'm not sure how much time I have actually.
1 minute. 1 minute.
1 more minute. Okay, then let me quickly show you a few more images. Adam Friedel here kept doing younger and younger images of Bouboulina as well at the time to sort of create this. Here we have the Russian Bouboulina, Babylina, as they call her in Russian. Let me, you know, in order to end, let me perhaps read what Commander Olivier Boutier, who met her, what he wrote, because that was a sort of one of the live reports. It's a very short description from his diaries. Bouboulina of the island of Spetses, whose ships are at the forefront of the siege of Nafplion, came to greet us. This was outside Nafplion during the warfare. She is a woman of 45, still beautiful, her comportment frank and forthright. She laughed out loud when we told her how celebrated she was in Paris, where all admired the paintings and drawings of her with raised pistols and sabers. Bouboulina is not a fierce Amazon, but a woman filled with the most generous and ardent patriotism. In the grand tradition of the women of ancient Sparta. She has lost her eldest son at the beginning of this war, but introduced us to her youngest, only 12 years old. He already carried his weapons well. He shot with surprising accuracy, first from his pistols, then his muskets. He embraced us, and then springing onto his horse, he rode off at a fast gallop, and we looked on with charmed eyes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Constantine, thank you for the interesting facts and images on the Arvanite Matriarch Bouboulina. Ju faleminderit për shumë fakte interesante dhe për imazhet e matriarkës arbërore Bubulinës. Tash kemi Professor Michelangelo La Luna, my good friend Michelangelo La Luna from the University of Rhode Island, USA. His topic, the influence of the Arvanites' role in the Greek Revolution on the work and vision of Girolamo De Rada. Tema e Professor Michelangelo La Luna, I cili vjen nga University of Rhode Island në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. Tema e tij është ndikimi I rolit Arvanitas në revolucionin grek në punën dhe vizionin e De Radës.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask if you can see my PowerPoint.
Yes, yes.
Yes. And now this full screen?
Yes, we see it, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Gashi, Mitat. Thank you to the organization. Thanks for this invitation. It's a very interesting moment, important moment to celebrate. So I would be happy to give my contribution. I am a scholar of Girolamo De Rada. I would like to just mention that De Rada is the, say, the most important founder, in a way, of the Albanian literature. He was born in 1814 in Macchia Albanese in Calabria, and he died in San Etio Corona in 1903. And he studied at the College of Sant'Adriano, where his father taught Greek. And his father was a Papàs, like Papàs BELLUSCI, ciao Papàs BELLUSCI, and as such, of course, he knew Greek very well. Now, this place, Collegio of Sant'Adriano in San Benedetto Corona, is a sort of boarding school, and it's very important for the unification of Italy. As the Arvanites gave a contribution to the Greek unification, we can say that the Arbëresh in Calabria were actually the only group that really helped Garibaldi when he arrived in Calabria, in Aspromonte. 500 people, students starting from 14 years old, together with the faculty, went and helped Garibaldi. So the contribution was so big that the Bourbons called this place Covo di Vipere, Fucina di Diavoli, nest of vipers and breeding grounds of for devils. You can imagine what that means. De Rada studied in this collegio, and among the readings that he had when he was a very young student is the one that is listed here by Pocqueville. You can read the French title if you want. The English translation is History of the Regeneration of Greece, including an account of events from 74 to 1824. Of course, De Rada most likely was reading it through the Italian translation by Stefano Ticozzi, Storia della rigenerazione della Grecia dal 1740 al 1824. And I posted here the editions, at least 4 editions came out. So this means that both in Italy and also in Switzerland, this book was read and was very well appreciated. Why this is important? It's important because thanks to Pocqueville, De Rada basically realized what it means to become an Albanian poet. He discovered like the soul of the Albanian language, the importance of collecting, for instance, the first Albanian songs. It came from this reading, besides the letter that he received by the lawyer, Avvocato Raffaele Valentini from Cosenza, to collect this folk songs, let's call them. And we can see this influence immediately in the main poems that he wrote. The first one is called L'Odisse. It was written in 1832, but published later in 1847. And then most of you know I Canti di Milosao, the songs by Milosao, Milosao songs, and Milosao and the Serafina Stopia songs. And you have listed the dates here of the publication. So let's talk about l'Odisse first. Odyssey, of course, makes us think about Homer, the hero that goes back to Ithaca after the Trojan War. And there is something of this in the poem for sure. By the way, this is written in Italian, not in Arbëresh, not in Albanian. So his first poem was written in terzina dantesca, imitating Dante, but also Monti, so it's all Italian. But Odisseo can, I think, be also, I don't know, the Greek Odudeus or Odideus, who was the Greek revolutionary born in Ithaca himself in 1790, and who participated in the insurrection of Morea next to Ali Pasha of Janina. So most likely that's what De Rada was thinking. The character is a hero, an Albanian hero, who abandoned Albania after the fall of Croy in 1478, and finds hospitality in Calabria, where he marries Eloda, the daughter of his compatriot Perlato. But there is more. Let's go to the masterpiece of Girolamo De Rada, I Canti di Milosao, published in Naples in August 1836. First of all, the long poem was dedicated to Demetrio Lecca. As you can read, Demetrio Lecca was born in Greece in 1779, and he was part of the Royal Macedonian Regiment in which he had served with Marco Bozzari. So Lecca was a big, let's say, fan, we use this modern word, of De Rada. He helped him to publish the Milosao. He also offered him the direction of a newspaper, L'Araldo, but De Rada did not accept. Within the text, within the songs of the Milosao songs, on Canto First, we have De Rada mentions Anacreonte and says that the Pisan of Anacreonte, of this Greek poet, comes from the Pindos, from the mountains of Epiro. And then he speaks about Salonico, the place where Milosao grew up, where he got his education in the army, let's say. And when Milosao lives in Canto 30 of the poem, he goes to fight against the Turks. He doesn't go from the north of Albania to Tirana or to in Kosovo. He goes somewhere in Greece. So the vision, the territory, the image that De Rada is using is that of an Arvanite hero that is going to fight against the Turkish within this environment created by the actual Arvanites hero that gave the big contribution to the Greek Revolution. So this is why it's so important. Basically, without the Arvanites contribution and without the reading that De Rada head of Pocqueville, maybe we couldn't have De Rada. Maybe there was somebody else later on, or maybe he would have started to write in the 40s, in the 50s, and we may have. So there is a big contribution to the, again, to the imagination, to the vision of this important poet for the Albanian literature, given again by the Greek Arvanites heroes. We have also in Canti di Serafina Topia other traces of heroes, of characters that come from the Arvanites area. Topia, of course, it's a name that you know very well. She married Prince Nicola Ducagino just to save a little bit the political situation, but she was in love, like a little bit like Romeo and Juliet with Bozdare, with this young guy. Also, this name comes most probably, maybe it's of Slavic origin, but was taken, I think, by De Rada from the Epiro, from the readings that he had about that area. De Rada speaks about the Pelasgi. He believes in the myth of the Pelasgi, and he says that many Greek deities come from this old Albanian population and language that has been lost. But I will skip this part. I will go to the after unification of Italy. After the unification of Italy, De Rada had also a little of political importance, let's say, if we can say, in the small town of San Demetrio Corone. He was not the mayor, but he was in charge a little bit of the culture of doing something. And one of the things that he did was the toponymy of San Demetrio Corone and of Macchia Albanese, his hometown. Now, if we think that we are in Italy after the unification, we should have there very important figures like Garibaldi, Mazzini, Vittorio Emanuele II, Mameli. Well, in these towns, they don't exist. They didn't think to dedicate any street to these important figures. But we have Via Maratona, Via Termopoli, Via Piano Morea, and then we have as important names, Bubulis, about which Peter Constantine just spoke, Ypsilandi, Bozzari, Alexander Ypsilandi, Marco Bozzari, Zavella, all people that are heroes that come, of course, from the Arvanites and not from Italy. Of course, there is also Via Skanderbeg and Francesco Crispi, who are very important figures, and then Via Dante, etc., etc.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Just one more minute. So in that other minute that I would like to say that De Rada, although he loved and the contribution and the heroes that inspired this poem, he was very, very careful and very critical against the Hellenic movement that wanted to take over Albania. He said at one point, he clearly wrote, it's better to stay with the Turks that at least respect the language and the culture, and not with the Greece. So he opposed firmly against many people like Crispi himself that wanted Albania to be unified with Greece, because he was afraid that this pan-Hellenic movement will kill the Albanian costume, tradition, and language. And with that, thank you very much. I'm done.
Professor La Luna, thank you very much for the enlightening presentation and for bringing De Rada's work to this. It's a great contribution. Faleminderit Profesor La Luna për të prezantim shumë serios edhe për paraqitjen e mendimeve të De Radës dhe vizionin e tij. Tash kam nderin të prezantoj Profesor Ibrahim Gashin, historian, hulumtues dhe ish rektor I Universitetit të Prishtinës. And now I have the pleasure to present Professor Ibrahim Gashi, historian, researcher, and former rector of the University of Pristina.
Faleminderit Profesor Gashi, të nderuar organizator të këtij simpoziumi, të nderuar kolegë dhe miq pjesëmarrës virtual në këtë simpozium. Përshëndetje nga Prishtina, nga Kosova. Dear friends, my warmest greetings from Pristina, Kosovo. It is a great pleasure, a great honor being among you, being with you today and giving a small contribution to the main topic of this symposium. Lëvizja për pavarësinë e Greqisë, sikundër e dim, ka kaluar për një trajektore komplekse historike. Në këtë proces lavdishëm historik të shkputjes nga sundimi osman, greket njohen edhe kontributet e popujve liridashës të Ballkanit. Pashallaku I Janinës, duke qenë gjeografikisht fqinji I parë, shquhet për mbështetje direkte dhe kontekstuale dhe në lëvizjes Filikieteria, që nga momentet e para të ekzistimit saj dhe veçmos në fazat kulmore të përpjekjeve për pavarësinë e Greqisë. Sikundër mund shihet nga titulli, trajtesa ime ka për objekt trajtimi rolin që ka pasur Alipa Shtepelena dhe Pashallaku që ai drejtonte në mbështetjen e drejt për drejt dhe kontekstuale të lëvizjes për pavarësinë e shtetit grek. Në këtë rast unë nuk do të analizoj profilin dhe personalitetin e Ali Pashës dhe as qeverisjen e tij të brendshme, për aq sa ajo nuk ishte në funksion të lëvizjes për pavarësinë e Greqisë. Theksi i kësaj kumtese do bie në analizën e 3 aspekte të veçanta të kësaj teme. Së pari, cila ishte çësia e Aliut ndaj lëvizjes greke për pavarësi të njohur si shoqëria e miqve. Së dyti, cili ishte kontributi i Aliut dhe në lëvizjes greke referuar burimeve të kohës, dhe së treti, cilat ishin drithijet dhe kontradiktat e këtij bashkëpunimi. Sa i takon çësjes se Ali Pashë Pelenës ndaj lëvizjes eteriste, shumica e biografëve dhe studiuesve të jetës dhe veprimtarisë së tij dhe të pashallakut të tij e konfirmojnë një të dhënë notore se në veprimet e tij për ngritjen e një fryme kryengritëse për shkputjen nga sundimi osman, Ali Pashë Pelena ndoshin një politikë të tolerancës ndërfetare dhe ndëretnike brenda pashallakut të tij. E gjitha kjo në funksion të realizimit të qëllimeve të tij. Ky kontekst i kësaj tolerancë dhe fryme bashkëpunimi i shërbeu dhe lëvizjes kryengritëse fqinje, pra greke, në të gjitha fazat e ngritjes së saj. Historiani i vjetër grek Arvanitinu në librin e tij Dy vëllimesh kushtuar Ali Pashës, botuar në vitin 1895, përmend me emra se në oborrin e Ali Pashës u formuan breza të tërë politikanësh dhe luftetarësh si Koleti, Alex Nuçua, Andrucua, Karaiskua dhe shumë të tjerë që rriten pemën e lirisë, si shprehet ai, të pavarësisë së Greqisë dhe të drejtimit të shtetit të posaformuar. Politika e dyrëve të hapura që ndoqi Ali Pashë Pelena ndaj luftetarëve për pavarësinë greke, përbën një kontribut konkret dhe përmbajtësor. Menjëherë pas krijimit në emigracion të shoqërisë konspirative Filiki e Teria, Aliu e verifikoi përmes agjentëve të tij veprimtarinë dhe synimet e saj dhe filloi herë direkt e herë indirekt ta ndihmonte atë përmes njerëzve që punonin në oborrin e tij e që fshehtas ishin anëtarë të kësaj organizate. Sipas studiuesit Irakli Koçollari në nëntorin e vitit 1818, në takimin që pati me përfaqësuesin grek në Odesa, Gjorgje Paparingopullin, i tha haptas se ai e përkrahte veprimtarinë e shoqërisë miqve, pasi edhe vetë synonte të çlironte pashallakun e tij nga sundimi osman. Paparingopullin nga una e tij dha shpresë Aliut dhe duke i thënë se kryengritja do të fillonte shpejt, sapo të ketë filluar lufta ruso-osmane, e cila sipas tij do të ndodhte brenda pak kohësh. Me këtë, Paparingopulli deshi ta mbante Aliun pranë shoqërisë së miqve, anëtar i cilës ishte edhe vetë. Një çësje e tillë pro lëvizjes greke, Ali Pashë Pelenës ka prodhuar edhe kontribute dhe efekte të drejtë për drejtë. Për shkak të kohës së kufizuar për të prezantuar sot, po përzgjedhim vetëm disa nga momentet më pikante të këtij bashkëpunimi dhe kontributi. Sipas profesorit grek Andriadis, kam javë dokumente për marrëdhëniet e Riga Ferios dhe Ali Pashë Pelenës. Njohja me Rigën ishte bërë përmes mjekut Dimitër Zikos, mikut dhe shokut e Aliut, i cili ishte edhe mik i Rigës që nga koha e studimeve të tij në Vjenë. Zikos u vrap me Rigën në Beograd. Një autor tjetër grek, Thelekos, tash unë s'jam bash i mirë në termat me gjuhën greke, do të shkruaj, në mesin e atyre që u përpoqën shumë dhe punuan në gjithë mënyrat për lirimin e Rigës, duke qenë edhe shumë, në mesin e tyre qenë edhe shumë janë jo, si Athanas Psalidha, Stefan Duka dhe mjeku Jani Qiriqi, anëtar i shoqërisë së parë të Rigës në Vjenë, të gjithë ta këshilltarët e fshehtë të Aliut dhe që vepruan me lejen dhe nxitjen e tij, fundi citatit. Autori tjetër, Anastas Guda, na bën të njohur impenimin e veçantë të Aliut për lirimin e Rigës, si një mik të sinqert dhe të fshehtë të tij. Citoj, Aliu kishte angazhu njerëz besnik të tij që të zënë në kohë pikat kyçe për lirimin e Rigës dhe ta shoqëronin atë drejt janimit. Sipas Lumos Kendos, në luftën për pavarësinë e Greqisë, shqiptarët që jetonin në ishujt Specia, Hidra dhe Peros nxorën nga xhiri i tyre figura të tilla kombëtare si Mioalis, Gjavella, Marko Boçari dhe komandantën detare Laskarina Bubulina. Mbështetjen dhe kontributin e Aliut dhe të pashallakut të tij për lëvizjen pavarësisë të greke e pohojnë besueshëm edhe shumë studiues perëndimor. Në veprën e tij shtatëvëllimshë, historiani britanik George Finlay pohon se në luftën e Greqisë për pavarësinë nga Turqia, ushtarët e Sulit dhe banorët e ishujve të Idrës edhe Speces ishin luftëtarët më të rima dhe marinarët më të zë. Citoj, dhe të gjithë këta ishin tërësisht me prejardhje shqiptare. Fundi citati. Shkrimtari i madh francez, Honoré de Balzac, botoi në vitin 1828 në Paris vargjet dhe elegjit të tij që përfshin këngët popullore që lartësonin Bubulinën, Marko Boçarin dhe të tjerë, të cilët ai i mblodhin nga një shqiptare e mërguar në Francë. Autori tjetër francez, Jean-Claude Fevrial, në librin e tij Historia e vjetër e Shqipërisë, në një rast duke folur për Ali Pashtë e Pelenën do të shprehej, citoj, nëse patin ndonjë të mirë, nga ai është se kryengritja e Aliut i shërbeu kryengritjes së grekëve, dhe se grekët volën frutat e një lufte ku vetëm shqiptarët e ishujve dhe vllahët e pindit derdhën gjakun. Fundi citatit. Në një linjë, por një hap më tutje në vlerësimet e tij për kontributin e Aliut do të shkoj historiani britanik, Wadham Peacock, i cili deklaroi se, citoj, nuk mund të përjashtohej mundësia që pavarësia e Greqisë të jetë arritur në saj të ndihmës së vyrë që i dhanë revolucionit shqiptarët si në Shqipëri, ashtu dhe në Greqi. Autori i njohur me origjinë austriake, Josef von Hammer, në vëllimin e tretë të studimit të tij voluminoz mbi historinë e perandorisë osmane, do të shkruaj, citoj, si duket, konflikti midis Ali Pashës nga Janina dhe sultanit e përgatiti terrenin për revolucionin dhe lehtësoi veprimin e Filiki Eteria, e cila kishte vepruar si një shoqëri e fshehtë nga tregtarët grek në Krimi. Fundi citati. Edhe autori tjetër grek, Denis Skiotis, në librin e tij Ali Pasha The Last Gamble, do të shprehë, citoj, revolucioni grek shpërtheu sepse gabimisht osmanët vendosën ta nënshtrojnë një njeri, pra Ali Pashën, i cili mund ta parandalonte atë, pra revolucion. Fundi citatit. Si lider i shkallët dhe makiavelist ekstrem, Ali Pasha synonte që të bashkëvendonte të gjitha veprimet dhe të gjitha aktorët e mundshëm për të ndërtuar synimet e tij për një qeverisje të pavarur. Edhe eteristët nuk e shenin me sy të mirë fuqizimin dhe pavarësinë eventuale të Pashalokut Janinës, në kufit të cilit Ali Pasha synonte të përfshinte edhe Thesalinë, Pirin, Akarnaninë, Tolinë e tjerë. Bashkëpunimi zhvillohej në kondita të një përfitimi maksimal për vete nga angazhimi dhe kontributi i tjetrit në luftë kundër sultanit. Eteristët synonin ta armiqsonin sa më shumë Aliun me Stambollin dhe ta nxisin atë që të fillonte i pari kryengritjen kundër sultanit me qëllim që ushtria turke të angazhoheshin në Shqipëri dhe shoqëria e miqve të fillonte kryengritjen kur do të kishte forca të pakta turke përballë vetit. Studiuesi Josef Hammer mendon se para 1820-s, pengesa kryesore për revolucionin grek ishte Ali Pasha prej Janinit, një lider i moshuar i cili kishte shtri pushtetin e tij në Shqipëri dhe në pjesën kontinentale të Greqisë madje deri në More. Edhe Ali Pashtë e Pelena nga ana e tij e kërkonte bashkëpunimin e tij me eteristët për mos mbetur i vetëm në luftën e tij kundër sultanit. Megjithatë, në momentet e fundit të jetës, kur po nëmronte ditët e fundit e lavdisë së tij, Aliu e ndjeu indiferencën dhe abstenimin e ndihmës nga shoqëria e miqve. Eteristët nuk e konsideronin me interes të tyre mbrojtjen e shtetit të Aliut. I bindur për këtë fakt, të cilën Aliu do ta konsiderojë si tradhti, ai u mundua të hyjë në bisedime me turqit për të ndalë marshimin e tyre, duke bërë tash një tradhti ndaj lëvizjes greke, pra duke e denoncuar shoqërinë e miqve pranë Stambollit dhe duke i dekonspiruar para sultanit planet e saj kryengritëse. Mirë po siç është e njohur, kjo nuk i bëri përshtypje sultanit dhe ai vazhdoi fushatën e tij ndëshkuese kundër Aliut. Të nderuar të pranishëm, nga kjo që u tha në këtë sintezë të shkurtër të kumtesës time, e cila për botim do të vijë në një version më të plotë, mund të nxirren disa konstatime përmbyllëse. Në një, Ali Pashtë e Pelena edhe përkundër autoritarizmit të tij ekstrem qeverisës. Në raport me lëvizjen greke u tregu më zëmërgjër dhe më mbështetës, duke e tregu kështu pjesën më afirmative dhe më pak egoiste të personalitetit të tij. Në dy, bashkëpunimi ndërsjellë dy lëvizje shtyrimtare anti-osmane motivohej natyrshëm nga ideja e përfitimit të secilës nga palët në planet të shkputjes dhe pavarësimit të vendeve të tyre. Në tre, roli i Ali Pashës dhe i Pashalokut të Janinës në mbështetje të lëvizjes greke për pavarësi, bazuar në referencat e kohës, ishte i konsiderueshëm dhe herë i vlerësuar nga autorë serioz grek dhe të huaj, mund të thuhet se ishte decisiv. Kjo frymë e bashkëpunimit dhe solidaritetit pashmangshëm u përshkrua edhe nga kontradikta dhe rivalitetet pashprehura të palëve, secila nga këto kishte objektiva caktuar dhe mundohej ta shfrytëzonte potencialin e tjetrës për të korrur suksesin maksimal për vete. Nëse na lejohet të nxjerrim bilancin e lojës së këtij rivaliteti, derisa Ali Pasha nuk arriti të merrte nga kryengritja greke atë që kishte dhënë për të. Dhe krejt në fund, pra pjesa më emocionale, por jo e parëndësishme e kontributit të pashait rebel shqiptar, mund të thuhet se ishte mesazhi i tij që u shpërndash shqiptarëve dhe grekëve të kësaj periudhe si kurajo dhe guxim për të rebeluar. Pra ai ishte i pari që shpërndau farën e rebelimit kundër autoritetit të padiskutueshëm shekullor të një perandorie, edhe pse ishte i ndërgjegjshëm për shpagimin e pashmangshëm që do ta kishte. Ju falenderit.
Ju falenderit profesor Gashi për këtë prezantim shumë serioz në lidhje me rolin e Ali Pashtupelenës dhe pavarësinë greke. Thank you very much, Professor Ibrahim Gashi, for the presentation on Ali Pashtupelena and the Greek War of Independence. Tash unë mbylli pjesën e parë të këtij simpoziumi. Të gjithë prezantuesve të pjesës së parë i falenderoj. Dëgjuesve të cilët kanë pyetje, rekomandojmë që pyetjet të dërgohen me shkrim dhe ata që merren me çështjen teknike do i filtrojnë pyetjet dhe do ua dërgojnë personave sipas mënyrës se si formulohen pyetjet, edhe do u lutemi të gjithë folësve që të gjenë kohë që pyetjeve t'u jepni përgjigje me shkrim, sepse nuk kemi kohë që të krijojmë pyetje përgjigje në fund. Thank you very much again. This concludes the first part of the symposium. I want to thank all the speakers of this section of the symposium. The members of the audience have some questions. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A section. Our members of the tech team will filter and send the questions directly to the speakers, and we'll give the speakers some time to send a response to you, to post a response on the Q&A section of the webinar. And if you still have any more questions, you can be free to email us and we'll be happy to respond to you by email. Thank you again. And now I call Dr. Elton Mara. Dr. Mara?
Thank you, Dr. Gashi. We're at the end of the first session, so before we close the first part, we would like to invite the president of VATA, Mr. Ahmed Jaffa, and then after that, his speech, then we will go to a very quick break, 4 or 5 minutes, and we will start the second part of this symposium. Zotë Jaffa, fjala është për ju.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Pan-Albanian Federation of America, VATRA, a warm welcome and thank you for your participation in this symposium. I'm excited at the caliber of your scholarly work, and I hope you will shed some light on the role of and contributions of Arvanites during the Greek War of Independence. As an Albanian American born in Chamria, now part of Greece, I wish the Greek people a happy 200th anniversary of their independence, and I hope the Greek government becomes friendlier with its neighbors and treat all its minorities fairly. I thank the organizer, Drs. Gashi, Mara, Elona, and Arben Lasku, Ms. Linda Meniku, Mr. Zotai and Umeri for their efforts in organizing this symposium, and I welcome the participation of Greek scholars to this conversation. I wish you all a wonderful symposium and special thanks for your contribution. Wonderful day, sir.
Faleminderit, Zotë Jaffa. Thank you, Zotë Jaffa. Okay, we will take a small break, 4 to 5 minutes, and we'll come back.